All right, this is the third video in our video answer key for the AP Summer homework for Chapter 1. So number 3 says, round off each of the following numbers to 3 significant figures. So I'm looking for 3 sig figs, and write the answer in scientific notation. Okay, if I didn't specifically say this, write the answer in scientific notation, you wouldn't have to do that with, at least with most of these. But I did say that, so we're going to do that. We're going to start out just by rounding them to 3 sig figs, and then we'll turn them into scientific notation. So the first one, remember your significant figures rules. The most simplified version of it that we've come up with is you're going to start at the left-hand side, just like you're reading a page. You're going to start at the left-hand side and move over until you find your first non-zero. A non-zero is anything that's not a zero. So starting here, my first non-zero is 3. Okay, at the very beginning, 3. Okay, I want to keep that number and then the next couple numbers until I get 3 sig figs. So I have 1, 2, 3. So these are the numbers I want to keep. 3, 1, and 2. Okay, then we follow our normal rounding rules just like you do in math. We're going to look at the very next number and decide whether that 2 rounds up or whether it stays the same. So we have 312.54. 5 is equal to or above 5. So we're going to say 313. That's the answer I'm going to go with, 313. Now, I'm going to mention something real quick that we're not going to worry about, but just for those of you who when you go on to college, you might come across this and go, man, that's weird. I've never heard of that before. Just want you to be aware of it. There are some college textbooks and some college classrooms that use a slightly different rounding rule. And here's what it is. If the next number is above 5, you round up. If it's below 5, you round down. Always, just like what we've learned. But if it's 5, some college textbooks, and don't worry about that, I am not going to do this to you. I just want you to go with the normal rule. 5 makes it round up, okay? But some college textbooks will say you need to then look after the 5. And if there is a number after the 5 that is above 0, so any number other than 0, after the 5, then you round up. But if that next number is a 0, it actually rounds down. We're not going to do that. There are just a few places you might see that as a rounding convention, and I wanted you to be aware of it. Okay, so now we've done the first part. Our second part is we need to turn this into scientific notation. So I'm going to switch colors, and we're going to turn this into scientific notation. Okay, if you'll remember, the place that we need to move the decimal for scientific notation is immediately after your first non-zero. So what's my first non-zero? It's 3. So I want it to be immediately after the first non-zero. When I say after, I mean barely to the right, immediately to the right of the first non-zero. So we're going to put the decimal right here. Now, how many jumps do I have to take to get there? 1, 2. So this becomes 3.13. And scientific notation always has a times 10 factor, times 10 to the power of, and we moved it 2 spaces, so it's either going to be positive 2 or negative 2. The way I remember how to, whether it's going to be a positive number or a negative number, is if this number, if the actual number is greater than 1, if it's greater than 1, it's going to be a positive number. If it's greater than 10, actually, it will be a positive number. If it is smaller than 1, so if it's a decimal number, then your exponent will be negative. So this number is definitely bigger than 10. We're going to call this 3.13 times 10 to the 2. Now, there are other ways to remember that. That's just the one that I think is most easy. So that's what I'm going to use in this video. All right, let's look at the next one. So I've got 0.0031254. This is a decimal number. These are where it gets a little bit tricky determining the number of sig figs for some students because they think, oh, I've got zeros after the decimal. Well, those must be significant. That's not right, okay? The only zeros that are significant are zeros that are after your non-zeros if there's a decimal, or the ones that are sandwiched in the middle. That's kind of confusing. There's a lot of rules and weird ways of knowing the rules. The easiest is just find your first non-zero. That's 3. And then we're going to count 3 numbers. Those are our first 3 significant figures. So I have 3, 1, and 2. Same numbers that we had up here, 3, 1, and 2. And that 2, does it round up or not? It does round up to the next number. So we have 0.00031, and instead of a 2, I'm going to write 3. Now we want to change it into scientific notation. So I'm going to move this decimal 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. Now remember what I said in the last problem. Now is this number bigger or smaller than 1? It's definitely smaller than 1. We've got a decimal number. So that means that my exponent will be negative. Okay, smaller than 1, exponent's going to be negative. Larger than 10, it will be positive. Okay, so let's write this out. We've got 3.13. Again, move that decimal right after the first non-zero, immediately to the right of the first non-zero. 3.13 times 10 to the, I moved it 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces, but that was a negative 4 because that's a small number. Let's do the next one. All right, 31254,000. Okay, we have 31,254,000. Okay, I need to round that to 3 significant figures. So the first 3 numbers are 3, 1, and 2, and that 2 rounds up to 3, just like in the last couple problems. This is what most students that have a problem with this will do. They'll go, oh, that's 3, 1, 3. Done. 313. One problem with that. 313 is not anywhere close to 31,254,000. Okay, so think about the amount of money that we're dealing with here. If I said, oh, you've got 31,254,000, I tell you what, I'm just going to round that up and give you $313 and change. That's not even close. Okay, so we can't think about it that way. We're going to keep those numbers and we're going to round to this place, but we still need to maintain the approximate place value. So that's 31,300,000. And I don't care if you put commas or not. The commas are placeholders. It's not a decimal. Don't get confused. It's just fine to leave those off of there. I just put them there to just make sure that I know how many spaces I've got. Okay, let's rewrite this in terms of scientific notation. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A lot of students will stop right there because that was their first non-zero. No, we need to go to the first non-zero from left to right. So that would be this. Okay, so it's 3.13 times 10 to the, and I didn't remember the number I just counted. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 10 to the something 7th. Is it negative or positive? Well, that's definitely not smaller than 1. It's a huge number, so that's going to be a positive sign. Okay, we got 2 more of these and then we're going to be done with this video. It's a little longer because this is a section. All right, we got a decimal number. What's my first non-zero? That would be 3. So I have 3, 1, and 2. Again, that 2 has a 5 right after it, so I'm going to round that up to 0.313. Great. Now we want to turn it into scientific notation. I want to move that decimal to the first, right after the first non-zero, which is this 3. I'm just going to move it right there. So I did 3.13 times 10 to the, how many spaces did I move it? Just moved it 1 space, so 10 to the 1. Is that positive or negative 1? Well, this was a decimal number, so it was smaller than 1, so this has to be a -1. Okay, 3.13 times 10 to the -1. Probably could have written that more neatly, I apologize. Okay, now what about this? This looks like it's already scientific notation. Well, let's look. Okay, I want to round it first. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and by the way, if it is scientific notation, you need to find a certain number of significant figures. Don't worry about this number over here. It does not impact your sig figs at all. You want to pay attention only to the numbers before the multiplication sign, before the x. All right, so here we are. We have 31.3 times 10 to the -3. All right, now that is 3 sig figs. Is it the correct scientific notation, though? The answer is no, it is not, because this decimal should not be there. It should be here. It looks similar to scientific notation, but it is not the correct scientific notation. So we had to move the decimal place that way. 3.13. And in this case, it's a little bit, you kind of have to think about it a different way. So, because we're changing something that's incorrect scientific notation to correct scientific notation. I moved the decimal that way. That means I had to make it smaller. That means it was originally a bigger number. So this is 3.13 times 10 to the negative. It was to the -3. But now it's going to be a different number. So I need to make my exponent a little bit bigger. Just like these exponents get bigger because we went from being a big number to a smaller number, right? Okay, so this needs to be a little bit bigger only by 1. So instead of 10 to the -3, we're going to have 10 to the -2. That one's a little bit harder. In that case, it may actually be useful to think if we're going to the left, the exponent gets bigger. If you're going to the right, the exponent gets smaller. I mean, it just depends on your perspective, what you think is easier. Hope this was helpful, a helpful review of significant figures and scientific notation. That one at the end is definitely the trickiest one. If it were a multiple choice question, you just need to pick the right one. On the AP exam, you do not get to use a calculator on a multiple choice question. But if this happens to be in a free response question, one thing you can do is I could put it in the calculator. Oh, that didn't give me out scientific notation. So just change your mode to SCI. Hit enter again, and it will tell you what it should be, 3.13 times 10 to the -2. So again, if it's free response, you can use your calculator to check your work, but just remember, multiple choice questions on the AP exam, you do not get to use your calculator. So you do need to kind of have the ability to convert back and forth, at least in a multiple choice context.